Have you ever stared at your phone screen, waiting for a message that never comes? Scrolled back through old conversations just to feel connected again? Thought to yourself, maybe they're just busy. Or, it's just a phase, they'll reach out soon. We've all been there. And it's easy to buy into those comforting narratives. But what if I told you those are the very stories that keep you stuck? That the silence you're sitting in isn't a pause, it's a powerful message. And if you don't learn to hear what it's telling you, you risk wasting weeks, months, even years chasing echoes instead of truth. Here's the problem. We've been conditioned to believe silence means nothing. That it's neutral. That it's temporary. But what if it's not? What if the silence you're receiving is actually the loudest message of all, clear, deliberate, intentional? That's what this conversation is about. You've been misled. The common belief is that silence means someone is confused, going through something, or just doesn't know how to express themselves. That they'll come back when they're ready. But here's the truth. Most of the time, silence isn't confusion. It's conclusion. And once you see that, your entire frame shifts. This is where the Stoic lens becomes essential, not as a coping tool, but as a framework for clarity. When we apply Stoicism to relationships, what I call Stoic relationships, we stop chasing meaning where there is none. We stop asking, why aren't they calling? And start asking, why am I still waiting? That's a question most people avoid because it stings. But that sting is your awakening. What you're about to hear isn't fluff. It's not comfort food. It's fuel, raw, honest, and transformative. You're going to learn the deeper meaning behind their silence, why it hurts so much, and how to respond in a way that's powerful, calm, and unwavering. I promise you this. Once you understand these 6 truths, you'll never look at silence the same way again. You'll learn to see it not as rejection but as revelation. And most importantly, you'll learn how to reclaim your frame, your self-respect, without needing a single word from them. So stay with me. Because what's coming next will challenge you, empower you, and if you let it, transform the way you navigate not just relationships, but yourself. Especially if you've been haunted by unanswered messages, unexplained distance, or that gnawing sense that maybe, just maybe, they don't care as much as you thought. If you've ever wondered what their silence really means, you're about to find out. And the truth, it doesn't just hurt. It frees. Ready to see clearly? Let's get into it. 1. It means you're not a priority right now. Let's get brutally honest. If they haven't called or messaged you for a long time, the message is already clear. They're not too busy. They didn't forget. They're not in a spiritual retreat without Wi-Fi. They've chosen not to prioritize you. That stings, doesn't it? But it's also the exact clarity you need. And that clarity, while uncomfortable, is a doorway. Most people don't want to walk through it. They stand there, staring at the silence, hoping it will morph into noise, into warmth, into proof that they still care. But that silence is the proof. It speaks volumes. The longer they go without reaching out, the louder that message becomes. But what makes it so hard to accept? You see, we've all been conditioned to fill in the blanks of silence with hope. When we don't hear from someone we care about, we imagine scenarios. They must be dealing with a lot. They're probably waiting for the right moment. Maybe they don't know how much I care. But that's not truth. That's self-soothing. That's the ego trying to hold on to a narrative that stopped serving you weeks ago. And the longer you believe that story, the more time you waste in limbo. That's not love. That's hesitation dressed as loyalty. You deserve more than that. Let's apply some Stoicism here. One of the key tenets of Stoicism is to control what you can and accept what you cannot. Can you control whether they pick up the phone and call you? No. Can you control how much time they've gone silent? No. But you can control your interpretation. You can choose to see their silence not as a foggy mystery but as a mirror. And what is that mirror showing you? That you've been prioritizing someone who doesn't prioritize you. That your presence in their life is optional, occasional, perhaps even replaceable. And that realization, though painful, is power. Now, I'm not saying they're evil. I'm not saying they're heartless. People have reasons, seasons, struggles, distractions. But let me ask you something. Would you ever leave someone you care about in silence for days, weeks, without even a sign of life? Would you let someone you claim to care for sit in confusion and doubt, wondering if they did something wrong? Probably not. Because when someone matters to you, you find a way to reach out. Even if it's messy. Even if it's short. Even if it's imperfect. So when they don't, that's not an accident. That's not forgetfulness. That's a message. And your job isn't to rewrite it, it's to read it. This is where most people trip. They keep sending energy towards someone who's not returning it. They send one more text. They post something hoping it'll get seen. They wait, anxiously refreshing their message thread, clinging to that illusion of soon. But Stoic relationships don't survive on illusions. They're built on clarity, stillness, strength. When someone goes silent, don't raise your volume, raise your standards. Stop making space for people who only show up when it's convenient for them. That's not patience, it's self-abandonment. Ask yourself this: if you stopped reaching out right now, would the relationship survive? Or would it flatline? That question alone reveals everything. Because relationships that require one-sided effort aren't relationships, they're performances. And you're the only one on stage. That's exhausting. That's draining. And that's the pattern we're breaking here. Because being stoic doesn't mean you don't care. It means you refuse to lose yourself in someone else's absence. You refuse to let silence shrink your self-worth. Let's break the illusion further. They're not too busy. They didn't forget. People make time for what they care about. When someone texts you back within seconds, it's not because they cleared their schedule. It's because they wanted to. When someone doesn't respond for days, it's not because their life is a war zone. It's because you're not their priority. That's not rejection. That's redirection. You're being guided back to your own worth. And if you keep fighting that redirection, you'll stay stuck at a locked door, blaming yourself for the key you never had. There's a difference between effort and begging. Between loyalty and emotional blindness. If someone goes quiet on you, that's not your cue to prove your value. It's your cue to remember it. What if their silence isn't about their confusion, but your clarity? What if it's a chance to finally stop asking questions that don't deserve answers? This is the foundation of Stoic relationships. You don't reach out to decode their silence. You stay still to honor your peace. And here's the twist: your reaction to silence says more about you than their silence ever could. Are you trying to fix it? Fill it? Fight it? Or are you learning to stand in it, fully grounded, fully present, fully whole? That's the real growth. That's the shift from needing to be chosen to choosing yourself. From tolerating emotional laziness to demanding energetic honesty. Let me challenge you with this. Imagine someone else is watching how you handle this. Someone who's learning how to treat you based on how you respond to silence. What are you teaching them? That you'll chase? That you'll collapse the moment they disappear? Or that you'll stay rooted, unbothered, self-assured, because your peace isn't up for negotiation? That's Stoicism in action. That's the stillness that speaks louder than any message. You weren't put here to beg for connection. You weren't made to cling to people who communicate with distance. You were made to stand firm, to hold frame, to command respect even when no one's clapping. And if someone can't match that energy, that effort, that honesty, then they don't belong in your life. Not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. They didn't forget you. They deprioritized you. And that's your signal. Not to panic, not to explain, but to pivot. To stop trying to make them see your worth, and to start seeing it for yourself. This isn't about ego. It's about clarity. And clarity always comes in quiet moments. The moment you realize their silence was never about you lacking something. It was about them never truly choosing you in the first place. You don't chase someone who left you confused. You choose to stop being confused by someone who isn't choosing you. You are not invisible. You are not unworthy. You are not forgotten. You're simply standing too close to someone who stopped facing you. And your next move isn't to step closer. It's to step back. Breathe. Recenter. And remember, this silence is not a punishment. It's a portal. Walk through it. 2. It means you're being tested. Not every silence is a goodbye. Sometimes it's a test. And here's the twist. Most people fail not because they're weak, but because they're unaware that a test is even happening. Think about it. The moment someone pulls away, our instinct is to close the distance. To check in. To make sure everything's okay. To prove we're still invested. But that instinct, though well-intentioned, is often exactly what they're counting on. Not maliciously. Not always consciously. But it's there. The silence becomes a trap. A stage. A strategy to see if you'll break character. Ask yourself this: what if their silence isn't random, but calculated? What if they're stepping back not to heal or disappear, but to watch? To observe how you respond? This is the moment where many unravel. They reach out again. They send long messages, hoping to reconnect. They explain themselves, over-apologize, trying to secure a bond that never needed to be begged for. Why? Because they've mistaken the silence for confusion. But silence, my friend, is rarely confusion. It's usually control. They don't always test you with words. Sometimes they test you with absence. And the deeper question is, how do you respond when there's nothing to respond to? When the texts stop? When the calls go silent? When their presence evaporates without warning? That's where character is revealed. And in Stoic relationships, character is everything. You see, Stoicism doesn't teach us to suppress emotion. It teaches us to master it. To feel everything, but to be moved by nothing that does not align with our inner clarity. When you're being tested, the key is not to react but to reflect. Not to respond impulsively, but to return to stillness. This isn't just about relationships. This is about how you show up for yourself. Because every test is an invitation to either prove your growth or repeat your old patterns. And here's the pattern many fall into: they mistake their emotional discomfort for a sign to act. But acting from discomfort only feeds the test. It proves you're still reactive, still dependent on external validation to feel grounded. Imagine this scenario: someone pulls away. Days pass. Your mind spins. Did I do something wrong? Should I explain myself again? Maybe they're waiting for me to reach out first. But stop. Breathe. What if the answer isn't in action, but in restraint? In refusing to perform for silence? Because when you don't flinch, when you don't fold under the weight of distance, you shift the dynamic entirely. Suddenly, you're not chasing. You're choosing. You're not reacting. You're responding, with calm. With control. With command. This is not passive aggression. This is poise. This is presence. Think of it like standing in a storm. Wind whips around you. The noise is deafening. But you don't move. You don't chase shelter. You stand tall. Eyes open. Breath steady. That's the power of Stoicism in relationships. That's how you hold frame. And believe me, when you do, people notice. Especially the ones who are used to seeing you spiral. Used to seeing you fold. When you don't reach out, when you don't take the bait, they start to wonder. Why isn't he chasing? Did he change? Is he really done? And that wondering, that silence from them, is the beginning of their own discomfort. But you didn't create it out of revenge. You created it through transformation. Because silence isn't just a response, it's a message. A boundary. A standard. When you withhold your energy from those who manipulate it, you reclaim something sacred, your self-respect. Now you might be asking, but what if they're hurting too? What if they're waiting for me? That's a fair question. But let's flip it. Are they reaching out? Are they showing up? Or are you being tested again into proving yourself while they withhold? Because genuine love doesn't operate on tests. It operates on transparency. And any connection that needs to be resecured by one-sided effort isn't connection, it's control. When someone pulls back to see how much they still matter to you, that's not romance. That's ego. And you are not here to serve someone else's insecurity. You're not here to validate someone who vanishes just to feel powerful when you chase. You are here to stand firm. To show that your presence is a gift, not a given. That your loyalty is earned, not exploited. And yes, that's hard. Your ego will scream. Your heart will ache. Your fingers will itch to text, to reach, to explain. But that's the real test. Not theirs, yours. Can you stay in frame when silence tempts you to step out? Can you hold the line when uncertainty knocks? Because once you do, once you prove to yourself that your peace isn't tethered to someone else's behavior, you become untouchable. That's what Stoicism is about. That's what Stoic relationships are founded on. Not on control or indifference, but on unwavering self-possession. It's not that you don't care. It's that you care deeply, but you care for yourself first. And anyone who wants a place in your life must bring peace, not chaos. Effort, not games. Presence, not patterns. So the next time someone disappears, remember this isn't a void, it's a viewing window. They're watching. Not always because they care, but because they're curious. Will you chase again? Will you break your own boundary? Or will you rise? Will you finally show them, and more importantly yourself, that your energy is too valuable to be summoned like a servant? Don't reach out just to fill the gap. Don't explain your silence unless there's mutual respect. Don't perform for the ones who disappeared. Because real power is silent. Real peace doesn't beg. And real love doesn't test, it commits. You're not playing a role here. You're living your truth. And when that truth becomes unshakable, the game ends. The test ends. And the ones who once watched your reaction begin to feel your absence. This is the paradox. The less you react, the more power you hold. Not over others, but over yourself. And in Stoic relationships, that's the highest goal, not to control the silence, but to master your response to it. So here's the challenge: stay still. Let the silence breathe. Let it echo. Let it show you who they are, and who you're becoming. Because once you stop chasing, the truth starts chasing you. And that truth? It will change everything. Now, if this message hit home, if you've ever been tested by silence and felt the pull to break frame, don't do it. Hold your line. And if you're feeling this video, if something inside you said, "This is exactly what I needed to hear," then do this right now. Like this video and comment, number 1, if you're stepping into this power. And if you want more content like this, rooted in stoicism, clarity, and emotional strength, hit subscribe. Join the tribe. This journey is just beginning. 3. It means they may have replaced you. Let's walk into one of the hardest truths to face. One that grips the heart with a quiet ache that's hard to describe. One that we often try to avoid at all costs. They may have replaced you. Maybe not with someone better. Maybe not with someone at all. But something else has filled the space you used to occupy. Another person, another distraction, another high. And if that stings, it's because it should. Not because you're weak, but because you're honest. Because you gave something real, and now you're left with silence. You see, when people vanish from our lives, especially without a word, we tend to imagine noble reasons. They're going through a tough time. They're healing. They need space. And sure, sometimes those things are true. But sometimes the truth is much colder, much simpler. They've moved on. They've shifted their focus. You're no longer in their emotional center. And we fight that truth. We argue with it silently in our own heads. But we had something real. How could they just walk away like that? Don't they miss me? Maybe they do. But not enough to stay. Not enough to fight for the connection the way you did. Not enough to make you a priority in a world full of distractions and options. This is the modern disease, disposability. Everything can be replaced. Phones, friendships, attention, affection. And many people treat relationships the same way. Swipe left. Ghost. Move on. Repeat. And you? You're still there, holding on to the depth while they chase novelty. That doesn't make you foolish. That makes you rare. But being rare comes with a cost. It means you will feel more. You will lose more. And you will have to build yourself back up from places most people never visit emotionally. Here's what you must remember. Being replaced does not mean you were not enough. It means they didn't know how to value enough. They didn't recognize the depth, or they weren't ready for it. And instead of admitting that, they drifted towards something easier, lighter, more instantly gratifying. It's not a reflection of your value. It's a reflection of their readiness, or lack thereof. Let that sink in. Because most of the pain doesn't come from the loss. It comes from the story you tell yourself about the loss. That you weren't good enough. That if you'd just done more, given more, been more, maybe they would have stayed. That story is a lie. A dangerous one. You didn't get dropped because you were too much. You got dropped because they chose less. And in a world obsessed with highs, it's easy to overlook the steady warmth of someone who truly cares. Fireworks are loud, bright, addictive. But they disappear in seconds. The fire you built, the warmth you brought, that takes time, attention, presence. And not everyone wants that. Not everyone is mature enough to handle it. Some people chase chaos because they haven't made peace with stillness. And in your stillness, your reliability, your peace, they saw a mirror. One they weren't ready to face. It's easier to run. It's easier to scroll. It's easier to replace than to reflect. But that doesn't make them right. That doesn't make you wrong. It just means the connection reached its truth. And the truth was, they were not ready for what you offered. So they found something, or someone, who didn't require them to grow. That's what replacements often are. Not upgrades. Not better matches. Just easier alternatives. You may have seen them online. Smiling. Living. Laughing. And your heart sinks. How can they be so fine without me? How can they post and play and pretend like I never existed? But pause right there. You're not seeing reality. You're seeing highlights. You're seeing a curated feed of moments designed to look whole, even if they're not. People don't post their confusion. They don't share their late-night regrets. They don't upload the moments they wonder if they made the wrong choice. So don't let the screen fool you. Just because they replaced you quickly doesn't mean they healed. Just because they're distracted doesn't mean they're at peace. And even if they are, that's not your concern anymore. Your concern is you. Your healing. Your peace. Your structure. Because every moment you spend wondering why they moved on is a moment stolen from your own growth. You don't need to compete with their new connection. You don't need to measure yourself against what replaced you. That's a losing game. Because your worth was never up for comparison. It was up for recognition. And if they couldn't see it, that's their limitation, not your lack. Let's bring it back to Stoicism. Epictetus reminds us, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. You've been replaced. So what now? Do you collapse? Do you chase? Or do you rebuild? Not to prove anything. Not to show them what they lost. But to return to yourself. To rise. That's what Stoic relationships are about. Not clinging to what left, but evolving through the loss. Not shrinking because someone couldn't hold you, but expanding because you've finally made space for something, and someone, more aligned. Don't let this break you. Let it clarify you. Let it purify your standards. Let it strip away the illusions and fantasies and bring you back to reality. A place where your worth isn't tied to someone else's ability to recognize it. You don't need closure from them. You need clarity within yourself. They replaced you. And that's painful. But it's also revealing. It shows you who they are. And more importantly, it shows you what you will no longer accept. Here's the final shift. What if their silence, their absence, their replacement, wasn't a loss, but a redirection? What if this pain is preparing you, not punishing you? What if it's making space for someone who won't need to be reminded of your value, because they'll see it immediately and consistently? That's the transformation. And it begins not with their return, but with your renewal. You don't owe them another thought. You don't owe them another message. You owe yourself consistency, devotion, focus. Build that version of yourself now. The one who doesn't break under rejection. The one who doesn't shrink under silence. The one who rises, not because someone left, but because someone finally stayed. You stayed. You chose you. And in that choice, everything changes. Not overnight. Not without effort. But piece by piece, moment by moment, decision by decision, you stop looking back and start walking forward. Because your life isn't waiting for them to return. It's waiting for you to show up. So step forward. The world hasn't lost you. It's about to rediscover you, stronger, wiser, unshakable. This is the work. This is the way. 4. It means it's time to reclaim yourself. Here's the shift that changes everything. Not when they come back, not when they finally message you, not when you get the apology you deserved. The real change happens the moment you decide that you are no longer going to chase, wonder, or wait. That moment when you take the silence, not as a reflection of your worth, but as a redirection to your core. Because let's be real, how many times have you lost yourself trying to hold on to someone else? How many times have you prioritized their absence over your presence? You keep replaying old conversations, checking if they viewed your story, wondering if today might be the day they realize what they walked away from. But the story doesn't begin when they return. The story begins when you reclaim yourself. This isn't poetic. This is practical. You've given enough. You've explained enough. You've waited long enough. Now it's time to do the work that matters, the internal kind. The kind that Stoicism speaks to again and again. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." And that's where this part of the journey takes you, from longing to clarity, from pain to purpose, from hope for their return to hope in your own evolution. Let's take a step back. What happens when someone stops showing up? You start doing double the emotional labor. You start holding space for two. You keep the connection warm, even though you're the only one feeding the fire. And somewhere along the way, you lose track of yourself. You start measuring your mood by their presence, or lack thereof. You start tying your self-worth to their recognition. And slowly your inner world revolves around someone who's barely orbiting you. Now pause. Breathe. Look around. The silence you've been sitting in? It's not empty. It's not meaningless. It's your mirror. The moment they withdrew was the moment the universe handed you a blank page. Not for you to wait, but for you to write again. Reclaiming yourself doesn't mean pretending it didn't hurt. It doesn't mean you stop caring overnight. It means you start choosing you, even while it hurts. Especially while it hurts. Because the strength you gain from that kind of decision is unshakable. Think about how much energy you've spent trying to keep a connection alive. How much thought you've given to what they're thinking, feeling, or doing. And now imagine channeling all of that energy back into yourself. Into your body. Your habits. Your vision. Your purpose. That's not selfish. That's survival. That's sovereignty. And it's the only way forward if you want to break the cycle of emotional dependence. You don't rise by accident. You rise by action. Not grand, performative acts, but daily disciplines. You reclaim yourself in the gym at 6 a.m., not to get revenge, but to get stronger. You reclaim yourself in silence, by choosing not to message them back, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you finally understand your peace speaks louder. You reclaim yourself by sitting with the ache, not rushing to escape it, but asking it what it's trying to teach you. And that lesson? That's your freedom. Stoic relationships are built on this very truth, not needing someone to validate your worth, but remembering your worth regardless. It's about becoming someone who doesn't flinch when left alone, someone who doesn't collapse when they don't get closure. Closure doesn't come from them. It comes from within. It comes when you look around at the silence and realize, this is the space I needed all along to finally hear myself. You don't need another text to explain what went wrong. You don't need to read between the lines of what they didn't say. What you need is stillness. Stillness to remember who you were before the noise, before the confusion, before the chase. Stillness to hear the voice inside you that's been buried under their absence. That voice doesn't whisper for attention. It roars for purpose. And now, it's your turn to listen. This isn't a motivational speech. This is your call to clarity. You've spent enough nights wondering if they'll ever see your value. The better question is, when will you stop waiting for them to? Your worth doesn't rise and fall based on whether someone decides to return. You're not a product to be picked. You're not a backup plan. You're not a placeholder. You are the whole damn path. And reclaiming that truth isn't arrogant, it's essential. So how do you start? Small. Quietly. Intentionally. You put your phone down. You pick your standards back up. You go for that walk you've been avoiding. You journal without trying to edit your pain. You make a plan for your next move, not in love, but in life. You write down your goals again. Not as distractions, but as declarations. Because when you stop waiting for someone to come back, you finally start arriving for yourself. Rebuilding isn't glamorous. It's messy. It's lonely. But it's sacred. And this silence, this void they left, is the perfect space to rebuild your inner structure. Not just emotionally, but spiritually. When you reclaim yourself, you stop chasing what's already left and start attracting what aligns with your true character. That's not magic. That's self-respect in motion. So when the doubt creeps in, because it will, remind yourself of this: I didn't lose them. I found me. I didn't get abandoned. I got redirected. I didn't fall apart. I let go of what was never holding me to begin with. That's not denial. That's evolution. And the person on the other side of this pain? He's wiser. He's calmer. He's untouchable. Because now, his peace isn't dependent on anyone else's attention. It's not about becoming cold. It's about becoming clear. Clear on what you deserve. Clear on what you no longer tolerate. Clear on who you are without the need to prove anything to anyone. That's the foundation of Stoicism. That's what it means to reclaim yourself, not by building walls, but by building roots. So if you're in that place right now, staring at a phone that hasn't buzzed, sitting in a room that feels quieter than usual, don't reach out. Reach in. There's a stronger version of you waiting on the other side of silence. Not someone who's bitter. Someone who's better. Not someone who's hardened. Someone who's healed. Now, if this part resonated with you, if you're reclaiming your space, your focus, your soul, then do one thing. Like this video and comment. Number 1. If you're stepping into this version of you. And if this message hit your heart the way it was meant to, subscribe now. Stay connected. We're not just surviving silence here, we're growing through it. 5. It means your silence now holds the power. There's a moment in every journey of detachment when the silence shifts. At first, it's heavy. Lonely. It feels like being forgotten. But as time passes and your stillness remains unbroken, something unexpected begins to happen, not to them, but to you. The silence no longer feels like punishment. It starts to feel like protection. Then something deeper begins to surface: power. Quiet. Subtle. But undeniable. You realize your silence now carries weight. It's no longer a reaction. It's a declaration. Think about how often you've responded in the past. How quickly you reached out after they pulled away. How many paragraphs you sent to make sense of their distance. How much you over-explained, over-apologized, over-performed, all in the name of keeping the peace, or staying connected. But the truth is, you were filling the silence because you feared what it might say if left alone. And now that you've stopped doing that, now that you've stopped trying to outrun the stillness, you're finally hearing what was always there. People don't expect you to stay silent. Especially when they're used to your attention. your emotional availability, your instant response. When you don't text back, when you don't ask how they're doing, when you don't react to their breadcrumbs, it unsettles them. Because suddenly, the dynamic they relied on, your reliability, is no longer in play. And here's the kicker, they may never admit it. But they feel it. They feel the absence of the energy they once took for granted. That's the paradox of silence. In the beginning, you think it's their power. You think they're in control because they withdrew first. But over time, your silence becomes the mirror they can't look away from. It's no longer you wondering if they miss you. It's them noticing the space you used to fill. The texts they no longer get. The stories they post that go unviewed. The jokes they send with no reply. That's when it hits them. Not just that you're quiet, but that you're absent. Fully. Energetically. Emotionally. Spiritually. You've shifted the frame. And that shift is everything. Because now, your silence isn't passive. It's intentional. It's the Stoic response to emotional inconsistency. Not out of malice. Not out of games. But out of grounded self-respect. You've stopped feeding a bond that only lived when you nurtured it. You've stepped away, not to manipulate, but to meditate. To realign. To return to yourself. And that return is loud. Not in volume, but in vibration. People feel when you disconnect. Especially those who counted on your connection to feel important. And when that supply dries up, when your energy no longer circles around them, they either do one of two things: they disappear fully, or they come back confused. Not necessarily because they miss you, but because they miss the version of themselves that existed when you paid attention. Your silence stripped them of that reflection. And now they're left with only themselves. That's not cruelty. That's consequence. This is the moment most people don't prepare for. The shift from being ignored to being noticed again, not because you chased, but because you didn't. And in that moment you'll be tempted to reply, to re-engage, to fill the gap again. But that's the test. Can you stay silent even when the silence starts echoing in their world too? Can you resist the urge to validate their curiosity with your attention? Because that's where the real power lies. Not in reacting, but in remaining. Remaining steady. Remaining still. Remaining unbothered. That doesn't mean you don't care. It means you've redefined what caring looks like. You care enough to let go of what drains you. You care enough to stop overextending. You care enough to prioritize your peace over their patterns. And that shift? That's unshakable. That's Stoicism in action. Not suppressing emotion, but expressing it through discipline. Let's be clear. Your silence is not a weapon. It's a wall. A boundary. A quiet recognition that your presence is no longer available for those who mishandled it. And that realization, it changes the temperature of the entire relationship. Suddenly, they're not in control anymore. Suddenly, you're not the predictable one. And in that unpredictability, they begin to feel what they never expected: absence. Absence is different from distance. Distance is a choice. Absence is a void. Distance means you're far away. Absence means you're gone. And when you're gone, emotionally and energetically, the people who once relied on your presence have to face their own reflection. That's when regret creeps in. That's when doubt grows. That's when they wonder, not just where you went, but why you haven't returned. But by then, you're no longer looking back. Because silence, once feared, has become familiar. Safe. Empowering. You don't need noise to feel connected. You don't need their text to feel worthy. You've built your own inner structure, rooted in truth, not approval. And that kind of foundation cannot be shaken by someone else's inconsistency. If they come back, they'll notice it immediately. The difference. The shift in energy. You're not angry. You're not cold. You're calm. Measured. Present. But detached. Because now, your peace isn't something you sacrifice to maintain a bond. It's something you protect to honor yourself. That's the power of silence. It recalibrates not just how they see you, but how you see yourself. This is what Stoic relationships are built upon. Not mutual dependency, but mutual respect. Not loud declarations of love, but quiet demonstrations of presence. And when presence is no longer mutual, silence becomes the message. The mirror. The lesson. You're not teaching them a lesson to punish them. You're embodying a lesson to protect you. So, when the urge to break the silence rises, pause. Reflect. Ask yourself, what am I about to disrupt by reaching out? If the answer is your own peace, your own growth, your own momentum, then hold the line. Let the silence continue its work. Because silence is not inactivity. It's incubation. It's where your next level is being built. Where your old patterns die. Where your true self is reborn. You don't need to shout to be heard. You don't need to argue to be right. You don't need to explain why you stopped reaching out. The absence speaks. The calm commands. And the silence, oh, the silence reveals everything. Not just about them. About you. Your strength. Your resolve. Your evolution. And that, my friend, is something no one can replace, ignore, or manipulate again. Your silence is no longer empty. It's full. Full of awareness. Full of dignity. Full of a man who no longer begs for crumbs from a table he used to build. Now he builds his own. And the guests he welcomes? They bring peace, not confusion. Presence, not patterns. And if they can't, the silence returns, not as revenge, but as reality. 6. It means the illusion is over. There comes a moment in every story where the fantasy fades. The excuses you used to make start to sound hollow. The maybe they're busy turns into maybe they don't care. The this is just a phase becomes this is who they really are. That moment doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly. A quiet realization. A sinking feeling. A truth you've been dodging because the illusion was more comforting than the clarity. But once the illusion breaks, there's no going back. That's where you are now. And while it may feel like everything is falling apart, what's really happening is that everything is falling into place. You've spent days, maybe weeks, trying to decode the silence. Looking for meaning in empty spaces. But let's be real, silence doesn't need translation. It needs recognition. And what it's telling you is simple: this chapter is done. Not because you failed. Not because you weren't enough. But because the story you were telling yourself about them, about you, was never built on truth. It was built on hope. And while hope can be beautiful, when misplaced, it can become dangerous. It can trap you in a cycle of waiting for someone who's already moved on. Of giving chances to someone who's not even in the room anymore. You held on to a version of them that existed in your mind, a version that was attentive, interested, emotionally invested. But that version stopped showing up. And instead of acknowledging it, you clung harder. That's not love. That's resistance. And Stoicism teaches us not to resist reality, but to face it. To embrace it. To let it shape us. That's what this moment is. The breaking of the illusion. The emergence of reality. It hurts. Of course it does. You didn't just lose a person, you lost the story you were telling yourself. And stories are powerful. They give us meaning. They give us a sense of continuity. But when the story becomes fiction, it no longer serves you. It starts to distort your sense of self. You find yourself doing mental gymnastics just to keep the narrative alive. They just need time. They're probably going through something. They'll come back once they realize what we had. But every day they stay silent. Every day they don't reach out. They're not confused. They're communicating. And you? You're listening now. Finally. Not just to them, but to yourself. To the part of you that's been whispering, "You deserve better." To the part that's been slowly waking up, realizing that your peace is worth more than someone else's potential. That your value doesn't decrease because someone failed to recognize it. That your healing doesn't require their return. Here's the hard truth: they're not confused. They're not lost. They're not waiting for a sign. They've made a choice. Maybe not spoken out loud, but expressed in their absence. And once you see that, really see it, the illusion falls away. You stop living in what ifs and start living in what is. And what is powerful. Because now, for the first time, you can choose something different. Not them. Not the cycle. Not the silence. You can choose yourself. Fully. Completely. Without apology. And that choice? That's the beginning of something sacred. That's the rise after the fall. That's the wisdom that comes only after the illusion ends. So what now? You stop negotiating with what already left. You stop rewriting the same story hoping for a different ending. You start building new chapters. With new standards. With new boundaries. You become the version of yourself that doesn't settle for half love or half effort. The version who doesn't beg for attention or wait for validation. The version who owns his silence not as a punishment, but as a practice. A daily return to what matters most, your alignment, your energy, your center. This is the essence of Stoic relationships. Not seeking connection through chaos, but through clarity. Not needing someone to choose you to feel chosen. Choosing yourself every single day, especially when it's hard. Especially when the silence feels heavy. Because that's when growth is happening. That's when the illusion is dying and the real you is emerging. You'll be tempted to look back. To replay the memories. To analyze every word they said before they disappeared. But you already know everything you need to know. People don't stay where they want to leave. And the ones who go silent are rarely confused. They're consistent. They're just not consistent in the way you hoped. And once you see that, really see it, your power comes rushing back. Like a tide you thought was gone. Like strength you forgot you had. You start showing up differently. Not just for others, but for yourself. You move with purpose. With intention. With peace. You no longer seek closure through their words. You find it in your own silence. You stop asking why they didn't choose you, and start asking why you kept choosing someone who couldn't choose themselves. That's the shift. That's the transformation. And it's irreversible. So let the illusion go. Let it burn. Let it fall apart. Because what rises from those ashes is real. It's not needy. It's not reactive. It's not tied to the fear of being alone. It's rooted in truth. And the truth is, you never needed them to validate you. You only needed to stop waiting for someone to realize what you already knew: you are enough. Always have been. Always will be. If they come back, you'll see them clearly. Not through the lens of fantasy, but with the eyes of someone who's been reborn. You won't hate them. You won't need revenge. You'll simply be indifferent. Because now, your silence is not confusion, it's command. It's clarity. It's the sound of a man who no longer performs for approval. Who no longer explains himself to the uninterested. Who no longer bends for those who break him. That's what it means when the illusion ends. That's what Stoicism reveals. That we are not here to be chosen. We are here to choose. To choose peace. To choose standards. To choose ourselves. And when we do, we don't lose anything. We gain everything. So if this final piece hits something in you, if it cracks something open, like this video and comment, number 1, if you're done with illusions and stepping into clarity. And if you want to keep walking this path, this journey of truth, peace, and self-mastery, subscribe now. Because we're just getting started. This isn't just content. This is transformation. Let's keep rising together. So here you are. You've walked through every layer of silence. You've faced the discomfort, stood in the stillness, and wrestled with the truth. Not just about them, but about yourself. This wasn't a story about heartbreak. It was a story about homecoming. And the home was always you. From the very first ignored message to the final moment of indifference, what looked like abandonment from the outside was really initiation from the inside. You weren't being left behind. You were being led back, to your values, to your center, to your unshakable identity. The silence wasn't the enemy. It was the mirror. And every time you sat in it without running, without reacting, you grew. Your mind became clearer. Your standards became stronger. Your soul became still. And that, my friend, is the heart of Stoicism, not to be numb, but to be noble. Not to be detached from life, but to be deeply rooted in truth. And the truth is this: you were never meant to chase someone who doesn't cherish you. You were never meant to explain yourself to someone committed to misunderstanding you. You were never meant to fight to stay in someone's life when your very presence should have been seen as a privilege. This journey, every silent day, every unanswered question, every pull toward reaching out, and every moment you chose not to, was your training ground. It wasn't the loss that defined you. It was your response to the loss. And in that response you rose. Quietly. Strongly. Without applause. You stopped asking for a seat at their table and started building your own. You stopped trying to prove your value to someone who couldn't recognize it, and began to embody it for yourself. You stopped being emotionally available to those who were spiritually absent. That shift? That's evolution. That's self-leadership. And now that you've felt it, tasted it, lived it, there's no returning to the man you were. The man who needed validation to feel valuable. The man who feared being alone. The man who compromised his peace just to keep temporary company. He served his purpose. He survived the storm. But now he's been replaced. Replaced by someone calmer, clearer, stronger. Someone who knows what silence means, and how to answer it without breaking. The silence taught you boundaries. It taught you presence. It taught you that attention isn't affection, and consistency is the only real currency of care. It taught you that Stoic relationships aren't about proving your worth through persistence, but preserving your worth through presence. It taught you that you don't chase love. You embody it. You don't fight for clarity. You become it. You didn't just read this. You lived it. You know now that real peace isn't loud. It's quiet. Real strength isn't reactive. It's composed. Real love doesn't leave you guessing. It reminds you of who you are. And if someone's silence brings you anything less than that, then it's not your job to decode it. It's your responsibility to walk away from it. Not out of bitterness, but out of alignment. Not to punish them, but to protect you. You don't look back anymore. You don't wonder if they'll return. Because even if they did, they'd find someone new. Someone they can't manipulate. Someone they can't test. Someone who no longer flinches at silence or chases ghosts. That's the man who emerged from this fire. Not because he avoided the pain, but because he walked through it with his eyes open. And that's what makes this conclusion so different. It's not about revenge. It's not about redemption. It's about realization. That you were always enough. That the pain wasn't proof of failure. It was the catalyst for freedom. That the silence didn't mean you were forgotten. It meant you were being reformed. Now you move differently. You speak less but say more. You show up fully for those who show up for you, and release those who don't without anger. Not everyone is meant to stay. Not every connection deserves continuation. Some were meant to teach you timing, others to teach you truth. And this one, this silence, taught you sovereignty. You're not here to fight for a place in someone's life. You're here to live a life so aligned, so grounded, so filled with clarity, that the right people recognize it instantly, and the wrong ones remove themselves effortlessly. That's the power you've stepped into. That's the peace you've claimed. And it didn't come easy. It came through discipline, through discomfort, through choosing stillness when every part of you wanted noise. That's what makes it real. That's what makes it lasting. So now, when silence returns, and it will, you won't panic. You won't chase. You'll listen. You'll breathe. You'll observe. And then, with calm certainty, you'll decide what aligns with your peace and what doesn't. That's the final message. That's the final gift of silence. Not to break you. Not to test you. but to bring you home to the man who never needed a message to remember his worth. You've heard their silence. Now hear your own. Let it speak. Let it guide. Let it remind you that Stoicism isn't about coldness, it's about courage. The courage to walk away when love turns into a test. The courage to choose presence over performance. The courage to say, "This is who I am, with or without your attention." That's the final word. And it's not shouted. It's whispered. It's not explained. It's understood. It's not spoken to them. It's spoken to you. And you? You've heard it. You've lived it. Now you embody it. Welcome home.